times are going to get tough. They are. It's inevitable, I think, in entrepreneurship. But if you really believe in what you're doing and who you're serving, then you just have to go with it and not give up on it.
Welcome to the Life Coaching for Mompreneurs podcast, where you will learn simple solutions to win at work without losing at home. Hi, my name is Martine Williams, and I am your host and CEO, your Chief Encouragement Officer. And this podcast is your one-stop shop to creating a burnout-proof life and business by elevating your clarity, confidence, and courage. Friends, it's time to say goodbye to being the yes girl, to procrastinating on your goals and living in overwhelm. And it's time to say hello to creating healthy boundaries, healthy mindsets, and healthy habits so that you can achieve work-life harmony. Your next breakthrough starts here. This is the Life Coaching for Mompreneurs podcast. Let's do this. Well, hey friends, welcome back to the show. I am so excited for today's Turquoise Talk. Yes, it's a topic we have not covered in the 3 years I've had this podcast. So I'm really excited to introduce to you Sarah Moffat, who is a wife, a mom. She's a podcast manager and a ghostwriter. So she has written Amazon bestsellers and has spent the past few years guiding people and sharing their stories through books and podcasts, empowering them to find their voice. And so this episode specifically, we talk about how to take your podcast and put it into a book. And honestly, I wanted to interview her because y'all know writing a book has been something on my list for, probably the last 3 years, but in the last 6 months, it's really been kind of moving up the list of things that I might want to pursue, just writing my own book, writing my own maybe devotional. And so I was really excited to interview her for selfish reasons, but also I know that there are many of you who are podcasters that listen to my podcast. So this might give you the inspiration that you need to finally write the book. So let's dive right in. All right, friends. So welcome back to the show. We have a Turquoise Talk guest today. I'm super excited. So thank you, Sarah, for taking the time to come on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about you, your family, and how you got into entrepreneurship.
Well, that's a story, isn't it? So I have a 4-month-old boy named Joshua who was just kicking off for feed right before our call. So perfect timing to be on a mompreneur podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm from America, but I live in the United Kingdom with my husband, who is from Scotland. So our little boy is probably going to have some sort of accent between American, Scottish, and English where he's there right now. I'm interested to find that out. And I got into entrepreneurship because my husband was a touring musician for 20 years.
Okay.
And when the live events industry kind of went upside down in 2020, that was coming to an end. But before that all happened, when I moved over to the UK, my husband didn't want me to just go from being a medical coder to coming to the UK and getting into the same industry and staying in the flat by myself while he goes up and down the UK. And he wanted me to pursue something that I loved, that I was passionate about, and that would allow me to be able to travel with him. Mm-hmm. And I had always wanted to be a writer. So I got into copywriting, realized I didn't love writing marketing copy. I got the opportunity to ghostwrite a book and realized that's what I love doing, being able to help people put their words into the written format, because I feel like a lot of people struggle with that. And that's just something that comes naturally to me. I'm more of a writer than a talker.
Yeah.
So that it fit and it clicked. And I ended up doing that and being able to travel with my husband. I'd write from dressing rooms or in the car or from the hotel room. And when his time with the band was coming to an end, we were trying to rack our brains on how we could continue to work freelance together. Because after touring the planet for 20 years, you don't necessarily want to go back to working in a corrugated cardboard factory. You know what I mean? Like, it's completely different lifestyle. And he's just so talented, and he believed in me. So it was my turn to be like, okay, let's find something we can do together. And it kind of made sense to get into the podcasting space because he's been writing music since he was 12 years old and he's 52 now.
Yeah.
So that it just made sense. So we started by partnering with a podcast manager and her agency. And whenever she would get a launch client, if they were interested in custom music, my husband would compose the music for their podcast.
Okay.
So it was kind of unique audio branding because he wouldn't lease it to another podcast. So if that was your music, you're not going to hear it on another podcast, which is a problem that you get with stock library music, right?
Yeah.
So we wanted it to just be very unique to you and your show. And then from there, I ended up taking a podcast manager course, the same one that this woman had gone through. And we started launching podcasts together. And I was doing the show notes and the back end stuff. And my husband was taking that audio ear and doing the editing as well. So that's what we've been doing since 2021, 2022. And more recently, I had the idea of combining everything and because it makes sense, right? Like people repurpose their podcasts into blogs and newsletters and social media clips. Well, I write books. Why couldn't you repurpose your podcast into a book? Because all of the content is right there. So that was a more recent idea and venture that I've been exploring. So that's a very long, condensed story.
No, but I love it because it shows the evolution of your brand, the evolution of an entrepreneur's brain and how you have this one idea and you just get started, right? Like you knew you wanted to write. And so you started writing and then you quickly realized you didn't want to write market and sales emails. And so then it evolved into what it is today. And I just think that's really powerful for a mompreneur who's listening, who may be at that beginning stage where she has this idea, but she hasn't birthed the idea yet, or she's afraid to birth the idea because like, do I have to stick with this? And I do think that's part of a block for a lot of entrepreneurs. It's like, if it's like I'm working with a client right now and she's creating a new business and she's like, if I pick this name, does it have to stay this name? I'm like, no, you can change the name. It can evolve with you. My brand has evolved over the last 5 years. And what I started is not where I'm at today. And people follow you. They follow the content you provide and the help and the services that you're going to provide. It matters for SEO and some of the technical stuff, but like to the client you're trying to help and serve, the name can change. It's not something you have to be married to. So I love that not only were the services you provided kind of evolved, but I'm sure there's been some lessons that you have learned along the way that maybe a mompreneur who's listening right now be like, yeah, but what if, like what are some of the lessons that you've learned along your journey of evolving and just kind of not resisting it, but just doing it without a full plan in front of you or a full blueprint? I mean, you didn't have that. You just kind of went, right?
This whole journey has been kind of off the seat of my pants, right? Like I left literally everything in America to move over here. Like I didn't, other than I was marrying my now husband, like I didn't have a plan necessarily. It was like, okay, here's my laptop. Here's the clothes I need. Here's my phone. Let's do this. Like I'm going to figure it out along the way. So even when I was starting the business and starting freelancing, like I had no idea what to expect or what to do. And there could have been so many reasons to say, well, like you said, what if this doesn't work? Then what am I going to do? But I had to stop focusing on the what if it doesn't but what if it does?
Yeah. Yeah.
And even when my husband was leaving the band, it's like panic mode for a little bit, right? Because what if it doesn't work? What if we can't find clients? Like, what if you have to go back to a job, or what if I need to find a job? And it's very easy to spiral from there and go down the negative path, but you just kind of have to stop yourself and go, okay, but really, what is the worst that can happen? At least let's start it. Let's take the first step. Let's give it a shot and see where it goes. And I will tell you, it's not been an easy ride. It's been up and down. Like there was a point where our bank account did nearly hit zero, but I will tell you that God or the universe or whatever you believe, it came through and found a way and provided the client that we needed at the time that we needed it. And it didn't always look like I thought it would. So I think you just need to have that little bit of, leap of faith and just go with it. And times are going to get tough. They are. It's inevitable, I think, in entrepreneurship. But if you really believe in what you're doing and who you're serving, then you just have to go with it and not give up on it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like the person you become in the process, like that's really powerful to think about the challenges that you've been through, the challenges that, I've been through in entrepreneurship. The challenges are there, like they're going to come. It's our response to the challenges is what makes or breaks the journey, right? And choosing to see the opportunity versus seeing just the obstacle that's right in front of you, because I do believe there's an opportunity in every obstacle, and every obstacle there's an opportunity. It's just which one you're going to look at, which one are you going to focus on? If you focus on the challenge or the obstacle, like you say, you kind of spiral down. Like it seems hopeless. Like my bank account's almost at zero. But when you look at the opportunity, you see, okay, I can impact that, or it's going to come. I have faith. I believe that this is going to be provided for me because I believe this is what I'm called to do. And there is a faith element to that, at least for me in my life, it's a big piece of my journey. And there's a lot to that. But I think if you can get excited about the growth that's possible in the challenge, right? The growth that's possible for you as you evolve your brand, it just kind of takes your focus off the day-to-day struggles and obstacles. And it's like, okay, but it's not that it gets easier, it's that you get stronger.
Yeah.
You get better, right?
I agree.
Because entrepreneurship is, I tell people all the time, like, you don't own a business, you actually own a roller coaster. There are uphill and downhills and upside down moments. And it's really how we respond to those twists and turns and upside down moments that, keeps the journey going and keeps you going. So thank you for sharing all that.
Yeah. And like I said, I'm a new mom, and there was a point recently where it's like, okay, I got to go find a job, right? Like panic moment, you lose that focus. I went for an interview, got back in the car and said to my husband, I was like, no, I can't go back to that. Like we need to make this work. And within 2 hours, I got a call basically offering me the job. And I was like, okay, this could be steady money. Like we can figure out a schedule and this and that. And I turned it down to keep going with this because I just knew it after I went for the interview. I was like, what am I doing? I'm giving into that fear that I fight this whole time and I advocate against. And here I am I'm going for an interview. And then as soon as I got in the car, I'm like, no, that was the wrong move. Like I could feel it. That was wrong.
Yeah. Well, and learning to trust your gut in those moments, right? And that you're making the best decision with the information that you have at the time. And you can always change your mind. It's like when you were talking about, having, to go back to work, like sometimes, supporting your entrepreneurship journey with a job, that does have that income. It's almost like there's this bad label we give ourselves, or like we're not a successful entrepreneur if we do both. Or what does it mean about me if I'm an entrepreneur and I'm trying to grow my business, but I also have to have a job? Like it doesn't have to mean anything. It really doesn't. There are tons of hundreds, thousands of people that are doing that. And so it kind of relieves the pressure in growing that business when you have something else to kind of help. So if you're listening and you're working and you're wanting to build your business or get into entrepreneurship, like it's okay if you do both.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with that. It's just for me personally, like as soon as I did it, it was like, no, that's not the right path for me.
Yep. So let's dive into this topic of what you do now and helping people take their podcast and putting it into a book. I'm super interested in this as a podcaster myself for 3 years. And I know I have a lot of I don't say a lot, but I'm sure there are some fellow podcasters that are listening. And I've been told so many times, like, you should write a book. You have so many quotes. Like every time I listen to your podcast, it's like, oh, I have a whole list of quotes that you say and one-liners and things like that. And some of them are mine and some of them are not my own. But for those that are listening, I do think there's the idea or the dream of doing a book, but it just feels very overwhelming with where to start and how do I take what I've already created in the podcast episodes and putting them into a book. So tell us a little bit about that process. Hey, friend, can I give you permission today? Like, for real, your own permission slip. Permission to get clear, to cut out the noise, mostly the noise that is going on around in your own mind, in your own head. It's just swirling. And you're asking yourself questions like, why am I stuck? Why am I frustrated? Why am I not making progress on my goals? I want to invite you to a free clarity call with me where we're going to dive in and we're going to identify what are the 3 main issues that are keeping you stuck. Number 2, what are the mindsets around those issues that are actually keeping you from solving for those issues? It's not our skill sets, it's our mindsets that keep us stuck and hold us back. And then number 3, identifying what are your next steps. We all have a next step and we have 100% responsibility for those next steps. Your only next step right now is to go to the show notes and book your free clarity call so that we can work through this. I'm believing in you and I cannot wait to see you on our clarity call.
Yeah, so I don't even know where the idea came from. It was just one of those things along the way, but it made sense to me. And like you're saying, a lot of people feel overwhelmed with the idea of writing a book. Like, sit down, look at the screen, and it's not like an 800-word blog post or a short caption. It's like, I've got to crank out chapters. And but when you sit down and actually think about it, and you're doing your podcast content, you're basically writing the book every week, right?
Yes.
You're just verbalizing it. But when I ghostwrite with people, we sit down and we come up with a plan. Like, I have a whole project prep sheet that we go through to get your audience, to get your messaging, and we work off of that to come up with your main themes and your outline. So when we sit down together, I'm interviewing them to gather the content to write their book, and we're doing it based off of the outline. So it's kind of the same concept when it comes to the podcast, right? Like, you're reading whatever your script is or however you do your podcast, and you're creating that content right there. But if you already have your podcast up and running and launched, it can feel a little overwhelming going, well, how do I know what content to grab and what episodes to use? And that's why I look at it as if you're starting your book from scratch. So I think of it as, okay, well, who is my audience? What do I want them to take away from my book? Why am I writing this book? And like come up with those, almost like your podcast, your content pillars, like your main, your few main themes, your few main topics. And that's when you go back to the podcast and go, okay, what episodes fall into this bracket? Which episodes flow and make sense? And you would transcribe it and not, I can't express this enough, not copy and paste it, but take it as inspiration. You can copy and paste bits of it and rewrite it or expand on it. And sometimes it sparks other ideas.
Yeah.
But it gives you like that framework to start, like, okay, I have some words on the page. Where can I take this? And you can do it chapter by chapter. And by the end, you've got a book in your hands.
Yeah. Yeah. For the clients that you've been working with, what do you find is their biggest, like, once they're working through the plan and they have the template to kind of follow, like you say, like, where do you see them getting hung up the most?
I do think it's which episodes do I need to put in? Which episodes are relevant? What content is relevant? But I also think it's really easy to overthink that kind of thing, right?
To the queen of overthinking over here. Yes.
But when I think it's more when you start from scratch and you do that brain dump of these are the type of things that I want to put in my book. These are the type of things I want to talk about. These are the themes. And then finding those episodes, then it just becomes a lot easier. And I always say to do it chapter by chapter or topic by topic. So you're not just putting everything in one giant document and then you're just creating a sense of overwhelm for yourself. It's a matter of, let's create your outline. What themes fall into that outline? Which episodes fall into that outline? And then doing it, okay, let's look at this episode, this episode, this episode. I break it down into different documents, almost like blog posts, separate blog posts, and then go, piece of the puzzle, where do they fit? How does this flow? And sometimes even what you're putting in the document from your podcast episode, things are going to get cut. You go, not relevant. Let's cut that. And you're creating something new from something that already exists. And like I said, you're sparking a new ideas. So you're going deeper into certain topics that maybe you didn't talk about on the podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. Being in year 3 of my podcast, the content creation wheel, I mean, you can recreate, you're not supposed to start over every single time. I mean, you can go back and repurpose some of the content that you've done years past. So as I've gone back and just like every November, my podcasts are all around November and helping my clients to flex their no muscle, understand that no doesn't make you a mean girl, doesn't make you less thoughtful. Like the whole month of November is on the first 2 letters of that word, which is no. And as I've been looking back at old podcast episodes, like you said, just to kind of glean some inspiration or just how can I say it differently? Because sometimes people need to hear it 9 different ways, 9 different times before it actually sinks in.
Right.
And it's interesting to see like how each year I've been able to go a little deeper, right? Or I've had another story or something that I can implement or insert in there to make the episode feel new and fresh and relevant, to the season of life that I'm in, the season of life that my listeners are in. So I was just kind of going down that as you were talking. I'm like, yeah, if I go back to like my first few episodes of the podcast, like where would that fit in my book, and it's really interesting to think about how the person I've become also in the 3 years and how I would read it differently and how I would write it differently. And as someone who is more of a speaker, they say a writer is a speaker and a speaker is a writer, but you do have one that's stronger than the other. I'm definitely more of the speaker. Obviously, I have a podcast. I'm not someone who's writing a ton of, I haven't written any books yet, but I co-authored one. But writing is a little bit more difficult for me. So I think hearing you talk about that and that's why I wanted to bring you on the podcast. It just feels like, oh, it doesn't have to be this big, heavy project. I'm already creating content with my voice. Writing to me, takes a lot of brain power for me. Whereas I can just sit and talk about this. We could talk for hours here on the podcast because that's kind of my gift of speaking. But I've been in the mode of writing a bunch of emails. And let me tell you, like, it takes a lot of thought for me to do that. I can speak it all day long, but sitting down and formatting and writing out the words, that's your strength. That's not mine. And we need each other, right? Because I can speak it, you can write it. And I think that's the beauty of entrepreneurship is that we all have a gift to bring to the table.
Right. But even with your emails, you could voice memo it and then transcribe it and then write it how you would write it to make it a little bit easier for you.
Yeah, true.
Because that's what some of my ghostwriting clients do when we're working on their book. If we're not having an interview and they have a thought and they're like, oh, I think this would be really great for that chapter, they would Voxer me their ideas and I would take it and transcribe it. And then I would craft it into the written content because, sometimes when you're speaking, that's not exactly how you would write it. You just clean it up. But if you're more of a talker than a writer, then voice memo is your best friend.
That's a really great tip. I never thought about that. I mean, I do like when I'm walking my dog, a lot of times ideas come to me. I always say the shower. My husband and I say the shower is the revelation tank. There's lots of ideas that come to me in the shower. I don't know if it's because I'm like by myself and no one's asking me for anything that allows my brain to go there, but I actually have a waterproof notebook in my shower for that reason. Because even though I can't audibly put it into my phone, like you're saying, I have a notebook where I can write these ideas down. But I use the notes app in my phone a lot because I do find when I'm not like at my desk working, I get more creative when I'm out moving my body and out and, outside in the sun. All those things help me to come up with some new ideas. But that's a really, really just like seems like a duh to you probably, but to me it's like, oh my gosh, I'm using that tomorrow. The next few emails I have to write, I'm just going to talk it out and then transcribe it somehow. So, super helpful. Well, what are some best practices? Like, does somebody need to be a year into their podcast? Like, is there a certain amount of episodes that you feel like someone needs to be in to kind of start this process? Like, if someone comes to you and they want to work with you, is there like, okay, well, you have to have at least 50 episodes, or like what size? These are a couple of questions. What size books do you see are ideal for using your podcast?
I mean, honestly, the more episodes you have in your content bank, the better, right? Because you have more to work with. But that doesn't mean that somebody can't have maybe 10, 20 episodes and then brainstorm from there. Because if you're brainstorming and saying, okay, this is what's going to go into the book, then you're creating your next couple episodes that you could talk about. So it's not necessarily you have to have a podcast of 100 episodes or more. It all comes together eventually anyway, because my husband and I have been talking about when we bring on a launch client, because we help people launch their podcast. But when we bring on a launch client, we can actually just structure their podcast right from the get-go to be able to repurpose their content into a book down the line. And as for the length, like I say, it's as long as it takes you to get your message out, because some people can have a shorter book of maybe 20, 30,000 words, and others have a book of 50, 60. But if you can get your message out in a shorter book, like you don't have to make it bigger just to make it bigger. You don't want to fill it full of fluff. You just want it to be however long it takes you to say what you need to say.
Yeah. Yeah. And so if someone comes to you and like, are you helping them like once they write it and then publish all of that? Or is that a whole different group of people they would need to work with to do that?
Right. So my wheelhouse is the writing piece. So when you walk away from me, or because I have a course that walks you through how to do it, when you walk away, you'll end up with a fully written manuscript. Now that doesn't automatically go into the publishing piece. I have an understanding of it, but that's not my expertise.
Right.
So I have a network of people in the industry who can help people with self-publishing. I work with a hybrid publisher, and they have a whole team of editors, proofreaders, cover designers, marketers to bring the manuscript that you bring them to life.
Right.
So there are a couple different publishing options, but when you work with me, you get the written manuscript, and then I can guide you on what works best for you and your goals, whether that's self-publishing, whether that's hybrid publishing, or whether that's, exploring the route of traditional.
Right. Well, that's good to know, because I do think, as someone, again, it all just feels overwhelming. So to know that there's like a one-stop shop, like with you, at least you could refer out and send someone where they need to go next. You're part of the process, but not the whole process. So you mentioned marketing with a publishing company, but as far as someone who is just trying to grow their business and reach new people, what is the impact of having a book to do that?
Like for me personally, I'm a reader. My husband is very much a listener. Like he loves audiobooks. He loves YouTube videos. That's how he learns and consumes content. Me, I need the book. I need to be able to read it, because a lot of times if I hear something, it's like in one ear, out the other. It doesn't really stick. Even if there's an audiobook and a physical book, I can read both and it just sticks better. So you're reaching a whole different group of people when you have a podcast and a book, because people might discover your book and then go, oh, they have a podcast, and vice versa.
Yeah.
But there's also that opportunity to use it as a lead magnet. If you make it an ebook or even a physical book, you could do it that way. There's opportunity, like speaking opportunities. I feel like a lot of people who start a podcast eventually have that dream to speak on a stage or author a book. And this is just that opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
Without having to put in that extra time and energy to write a book from scratch.
Yeah. What is the process? Like, how long if someone was to come and start the process with you? Like, what's your typical turnaround from start to finish on the manuscript? Because again, I'm just thinking of someone who's listening and they're like, all these questions in their head are, okay,
Yeah.
well, now we know the plan. She has a plan. We know the process, but like, how long is this going to take? Is this going to take up 6 months of my life? I mean, I've seen all different people who help people write books. And there's some that say in 90 days, you can have your book and be on a bestsellers list. And there's others that it's like, it's a longer process. So tell me what you have seen on average with the people that you work with.
Yeah. For me, I always say minimum of 6, but can go up to a year. But
Okay.
that's because I really like to take the time to hone in on your messaging, your theme, and your content and weaving everything together. If you're taking the time and energy to actually sit down and do the book, you want to do it right. You don't want to just rush it to get it out in 90 days. You want it to actually be an impactful, but I mean, it's your words, it's your name, it's part of your brand and your business. You don't want to just rush it to say, I've got the book done. You want to take your time with it. So I say minimum of 6 months, but could take up to a year.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it also depends on how much time you have to dedicate to it, because I've had clients that we've finished it in less than the 6 because they were just super dedicated and said, I've got the time, let's get this done. But then I've had ones that have gone a little bit over the year just because of what they had on their plate. But we get it done.
Yeah. 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 And would you say, and this might be different for everyone, I'm just thinking like the work that I do with my clients is based on like the strengths of their personality. And I know that some move faster than others naturally. You know, I'm definitely more of a steady, unhurried. I process things. And then there are others that will just, let's get it done, move really fast. But what would you say also, like how much time per day, per week, would you tell a client to kind of set aside to work on this? Is there an ideal time?
I mean, whatever works for your lifestyle, really.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I mean, for me, I've got a 4-month-old. So when I work on my projects, I know what my capacity is, but I always try to make sure, like, if I say I'm going to do it, I stick to it. And I think that's the beauty of working with somebody, like alongside somebody. You have that bit of accountability going, okay, well, I know we've got these interviews scheduled, or I know we have this milestone. She wants to get the chapter done by this date. So, I mean, really, whatever works for you and your personality. But if you're somebody that's like, oh, I'm going to get it done, and then you know you're not going to get it done, I would make sure you have some sort of accountability, whether it's somebody professional or if it's somebody just in a group or writers group, and say, hey, can we check in every week and make sure I hit whatever goal you set for yourself?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just to keep the ball rolling.
Yeah, because it's, you know, I can see a lot of people getting super excited. Oh, I'm writing a book, and they get super excited in the beginning. It's kind of like the New Year's resolutions. You're super excited in the moment. But then when you like get into it, it starts feeling heavy and hard. I'm like, oh, well, maybe I'd rather go over here and do this instead. And so I can just see where it would, I'm sure you see this with your clients as well. So we're all human, and these are the human experiences that we have. Well, tell us what you're most excited about in your life or in your business right now as we kind of wrap up.
My little baby.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a whole new season, I guess, of navigating life with a baby, life with a business, like just seeing how that evolves and where that goes. And yeah, just every day is completely different these
It
days.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't know what to expect.
And every mompreneur on the that's listening is like, yep, I know exactly where she's at, no matter what stage of parenting you're in. So, well, tell everyone how they can connect with you if they want, if they have this idea and they have a podcast, or maybe they don't and they just want to talk to someone about the book writing process. How can they get in touch with you?
So my husband and I have an Instagram account. It's sarah.billy.moffat. We have our website, musicalcrimeproductions.com, if you want to check out some of the clients that we work with, some of the music that my husband writes for podcast launches. And then I have a podcast to book course that if it's something that you just wanted to sit down and kind of go at your own pace, and, you know, you would have me on the other end to be able to reach out to. And if you got hung up on anything, I have a podcast to book blueprint, which I can send you the link to, and you can link that
in
your show notes if you would like. And what I can do is give you a promo code. So if there's anybody who's interested and finds it through the podcast, you'll have a code directly for them to plug in, and we can let's put it in Martine.
Okay.
I'll create that promo code and I'll send that to you. So if anybody wants to join and finds you through the podcast, just plug in Martine and we'll give you a discount on it.
Awesome. I love that. Thank you so much. Yeah, we'll include the links to everything in the show notes for everyone listening. So I know a lot of you are either folding laundry or taking the kids somewhere, or maybe you're outside, hopefully getting some movement for your body, because movement is medicine. But either way, we'll have the links for you in the show notes. And thank you so much, Sarah, for coming on today. Just such a great topic. And I can't wait to see what you do next in your entrepreneur journey.
Likewise. Thank you.
All right, friends, I'll catch you on the next episode. Well, that's a wrap, friends. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. I really hope it met you right where you are and gave you some encouragement for your day. Could you do me the biggest favor and leave me a rating and review? Seriously, it's the best way for you to support the show. And while you're there, be sure to follow the show so you never miss an episode. Thanks again. And until next time, I am believing in you always.